thank you very much for joining us today on our Life Stories Conversations. I'd like to start by asking you to introduce yourself and talk about your research, your projects, what brought you to this work.
Okay, well, I'm very happy to be here. My name is Erin Devor, and I have the pleasure of having a unique position in the world as the chair in transgender studies at the University of Victoria. I have been working in transgender studies for over 35 years. And so that means that when I started this, we didn't even have the word transgender. There certainly wasn't a transgender studies, and the word transgender was not even in use yet. So one of my early works was a book called Gender Blending. And I called it that because I was attempting to find a word to describe what today would probably be called non-binary. And so I was looking at people whose gender was somewhat fluid and in between and not communicated as effectively as they wanted. And we had no language for that. And when I searched out people to interview, it was based on interviews. So it was very much about people's lives and how their lives were affected by gender. When I set out to find people, I advertised, word of mouth, that kind of thing. Every single person I talked to said, I have never spoken to anyone about this before.
That's profound.
Mm-hmm.
It's truly profound. Yeah. So you've been telling me about how your research got rolling, and I'd love to hear more about that, your early days, what kept you going, what brought you into the work, and hear about some of your projects.
So as I said, I started many years ago, and I actually have a belief that most of us who have careers as opposed to jobs have careers about subject matter that fascinates us and that we can devote ourselves to working on for years and years and years, basically because we don't get it. And that's why it continues to be interesting to us for all of those years. And so I have been interested in gender for many, many years, and I think by now I do get it. But that's what motivated me in the beginning to start exploring gender, because I was, earlier in my life, a very gender non-conforming person. Today I'm pretty conforming. But I was a very gender non-conforming person earlier in my life, and I didn't communicate well to other people how I wanted them to see me, how I wanted them to understand me. And I needed to understand what is going on with this gender thing, and why do people not understand me, and why does my gender nonconformity cause other people distress, which then becomes my distress because they impose it on me. And that's really what the first work was about. It was specifically looking at people who were attempting to portray a particular kind of gender, or at least said they were attempting to portray a particular kind of gender, and were misunderstood and misgendered by other people. Now again, I have to say, we didn't have any of this language then. I'm able to say these things now, people know what I'm talking about. But then it took a whole book to explain things that I can now say in a couple of sentences, because
the
it was
power of scholarship.
It was unexplored.
Extraordinary.
Yeah. So that was the beginning of it. From there, I got interested in transsexualism, and I was interested in people who went out and, in fact, did want to communicate a gender that was not what other people would expect from them, and had to learn how to use the clues or the cues that all the rest of us take for granted and use without a moment's thought and feel is natural to us and automatic to us. Transsexual people need to learn how to realign with a whole different set of communication about their gender. And so they become experts, in a way, in how gender is communicated. And how do you get people to understand you as you see yourself, which takes a certain effort if it doesn't line up with the expectations of society. And so again, I'm trying to learn, how does gender work? How do we understand it? How do we communicate it? And people who change their gender certainly go through a life transition that is very profound, but everyone around them also goes through a life transition that's quite profound. And everyone around them goes through a transition because they have to learn to see an individual that they knew one way, an entirely different way. And on top of that, for most people, that process causes them to understand gender quite differently than they did before. So there's a ripple effect. It's not just about one person changing, but everyone around them.
Network of relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's just fascinating. Yeah. And so I see that storytelling is at the heart of your practice. Could you say a little bit about that?
Yes, so storytelling is central to the work that I've done trying to understand gender, in that my research method is interviewing. And so I would seek out people who had the stories to tell that I was interested in and have them tell their stories, listen very carefully, and then try and take bigger lessons from the individual stories or the composite of the individual stories that teach us something about the social forces at work. More recently, my work has focused, part of my work has focused on building the transgender archives here at the University of Victoria. So the transgender archives are a treasure trove of historical documents that are what historians write history from. And history, of course, is telling a story. And history can be written many different ways, depending on whose stories you listen to and whose stories you prioritize, and how you integrate or not the places where the stories don't mesh well. And so very little transgender history has actually been written at this point. The collection we have here at the University of Victoria, if you took all of the books and bankers' boxes and objects and put them all on one big long shelf, would be a football field and a half long. So there's a lot of material there that has not yet been fully discovered. Many people don't understand what archives are or how they work. So it's letters that people write to each other, it's photographs, it's people's journals and diaries, it is books that have been written, but it's also the material that went into the writing of the books. So the correspondence between the authors, the earlier drafts, the research materials and data that the books are written from. It's films, it's audio recordings, it's a whole range of materials. All of these are telling stories in different ways. But nobody knows exactly what's in there. Because if you think about a football field and a half, most of that, a shelf that long, most of that is made up of some kind of paper. There are objects and there are audio materials and video materials, but most of it is paper. How many sheets of paper is that? Nobody has looked at all of those sheets of paper. And so we have catalogs and listings of what we have, and I can tell you that in the Reed Erickson collection, in box number 12, for instance, there are 35 file folders. And I can tell you that file folder number 6 has correspondence in it. I can't tell you who wrote letters to who, on which date, and what they said. Somebody has to go and open up that file folder and look at it in order to tell that story. And then, of course, that's just a little piece of the story. And so there are an untold number of stories in these archives waiting to be unearthed and put together with the other stories, because I'll find a letter in there and it will be from Harry Benjamin to Reed Erickson, and it will reference something that they did together or somebody else they visited, and then I have to go find out the rest of the story somewhere else and track it down. Okay? So that is ongoing work, and my part of that work is really creating the collections, bringing together materials that other people have collected and saved and donate to the University of Victoria, and making that research tool available to the historians who will write the history and to many other people. So we also get many artists who come in here, and artists who come in here for inspiration for visual art, artists who come in here for inspiration for children's books, novels, and people who are studying fashion and how that's changed. People are studying how the medical establishment has changed their relationship with the trans community, or how the trans community has influenced the medical establishment, and many other stories. And so those stories are here to be found and here to be told. And that is my more recent work, is mostly devoted to making sure that we preserve the material that people need in order to uncover those stories and tell them more accurately and fully.
Yeah. And I love the way you've built a whole sort of intellectual program around that, with bringing fellows to campus and having a conference and really promoting the richness of that archive and making it accessible and spreading the fame of it. It's incredible.
Thank you. So, we have this tool here, and it is important that people know that it's here and have access and are able to use it. The reality is that we're on an island off the coast, and we're not the most accessible place. The content of the archives is free and open to the public, so anybody can come in here. You don't have to be faculty or student or have a UVic library card. There's no cost other than the effort to get here. So part of what we do is we digitize materials, but only a very small fraction of everything we have can be digitized. We have a scholarship program for students at the University of Victoria, undergraduate, master's, and doctoral students, to help with some of their costs. The scholarships are small, but they are very appreciated. We also have a fellowships program, and the fellowships program is for people who are not students at UVic, who are faculty or community members who want to come here from other locations and make use of the materials. So again, they're not big, but we give them a little boost, a little bit of a help to come and do work here in the archives. Then in addition to that, we have visiting scholars who come on their own steam. So they may have a fellowship from somewhere else. They may be a faculty member who's on sabbaticals. So last year, for instance, we had a faculty member came to us from the People's Republic of China and stayed for a full year. We had a student, a master's student on a scholarship who came from Thailand for 8 months. Currently, I have a faculty member on sabbatical for a full year from a university in Japan who's staying. So we have longer-term visitors like that. We have visitors come for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, 2 or 3 months. And we provide them with basic facilities like an office space and access to the UVic computer system and the library resources and so on, and they do their research here. In addition to that, we ask pretty much everyone who comes to visit, will you do a public lecture, please? So the long-term visitors, the short-term visitors, the people who are here for only a week, the scholarship winners, local graduate students, we're trying all the time to bring knowledge to the public.
Yeah.
And so we have an ongoing lecture series. It slows down, well, no, it doesn't. There's a month or so in August is a little slow, but pretty much the rest of the year, we're all the time. Every couple of weeks we have somebody speaking, because we get a lot of faculty and students who visit in the summer, and then during the year we have our more long-term visitors, but we have shorter visitors even during the year. So we have a lecture series. We also do arts events. So I was mentioning to you earlier that we have an art exhibit going up for 3 months at the Legacy Gallery downtown. We've done that before. And we have had performance artists come in, spoken word artists come in. We had a dance troupe come in 1 year. So we have that. We have social events that we have for the community, where once a month I have nachos night. I provide free food and beer and pop, and so that's a community service, and so that we do that. And one of our really big events is we have a conference every 2 years. That's called Moving Trans History Forward. It started in 2014. It was focused on archives for the first one. We had 85 people, which we thought was a nice turnout for a first time around. 2016, we were up to 150, and we started to broaden our scope to trans topics more generally. 2018, we had 300 people registered. And for 2020, we've had to move off campus because it's doubled each time, and we're expecting 500 for 2020. We'll see if that
That's
expectation
tremendous.
comes true.
Yeah, yeah.
But we've moved it to the conference center downtown. It's an international and interdisciplinary. It is not strictly an academic conference by design. It is meant to be accessible to the public. The official language of the conference is plain English. And we try our best to enforce that. And our registration statistics show us that we get about 50% students and faculty and staff from universities and about 50% people from the community at large. And that is our goal, to maintain that. We want that dialogue. We have an age range from teenagers to octogenarians.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And the trans community has many different streams, and we try and get people from all of those streams to come in, and I very strongly encourage people to talk to people they've never talked to before, and to get out of their bubble and to expose themselves to something new. So the conferences are dear to my heart, and next one is April 2nd to 5th, 2020 at the Conference Center downtown.
I love that intergenerational, that you're getting people all across the spectrum of the lifespan. That's really impressive.
So the intergenerational aspect of the conference is built right into the structure of the conference. So we usually have an opening night speaker, and opening night is a Thursday night, and we have a broad range of community people and community thought leaders that I invite to opening night. Last time we had greetings from Trudeau's, the Prime Minister's special advisor on LGBTQ issues. That was a video greeting. We had the Minister of Education from the province, also a video greeting. We had several MPs and MLAs come in person. And I try and bring in a cross-section of the community to that. We have a keynote speaker on a Friday night and a Saturday night. But the intergenerational aspect comes in that Saturday morning is set aside, a section of Saturday morning is set aside for a plenary of youth, talking about their experiences being trans, non-binary, or two-spirit youth. And then Sunday morning is set aside for a plenary panel of elders, speaking about their experiences. And so we have, that's built into the structure of the conference, and of course the elders go to the youth panel, and the youth go to the elders panel, and hopefully they're interacting throughout. The elders, at the beginning it was elders of activism, well actually, let me start that again. In the beginning it was people who were founders of the Transgender Archives, who gave foundational collections to start the Transgender Archives. Then we moved into elders of trans activism and research. And I'm trying to maintain that theme, and I try to get people on the elders panel who have a minimum of 20 years experience and are late 50s, early 60s as a minimum. I had one person on who was 90. I have had people in their 80s, and I have had people who have 40 and 45 years experience. The youth panel, we don't go too young, but early 13, 14 is to maybe 19 or 20. And anybody that's on the youth panel, I ensure that not only do they agree to be on the panel, but that their parents or guardians also agree to them being on the panel.
I just love that. It's that intergenerational dialogue that really informs the way we change and grow. And that's been a theme throughout our discussions with other scholars and artists and curators as part of these conversations, is that intergenerational dynamic. We tend to silo out the generations and create these divides, and so bringing those generations together is so important.
Well, it's, as I say, it's built into the structure of what we do at the conference. And I think it's important to recognize, again, coming back to the gender theme as well, that how we do gender and what gender means changes as we move through the life cycles. So the meaning of gender for a 14-year-old is quite different than for a 25-year-old, which is quite different again for a 45-year-old. And by the time you're 65 or 85, each of these stages of life,
I so agree.
what it means for you changes.
I so agree.
It is not a static thing.
No.
And so I think it's important for all of us to be learning from each other in both directions.
Yeah. Yeah. And are there future projects that you'd like to grow as part of the archive and your activities?
So the project that I'm working on now, which I hope to be able to continue for a while, we'll see how the funding goes, is oral histories. So we are seeking out transgender elders,
Fantastic. More stories. Fantastic.
and we're talking to elders and getting their life stories about what it's been like for them to live through their generations and the changes that they've seen in their lifetime, which for trans people who are 60 and up, they've seen tremendous changes about what freedom there is within the gender constraints that we still live in. There's it's not that they're gone, but they've seen huge changes. And so we want to capture, I'm working with a team that we want to capture their stories, and we're doing video interviews with them. So that's a project that's just getting started now, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to continue that for several years. And of course those will be deposited in the transgender archives.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wonderful.
So an interesting life stages question that most people never really stop to think about that is unique to trans people are for those trans people who transition as adults. So all of us, trans or not, and not, by the way, is called cis, C-I-S, at puberty, we're under the influence of hormones. Our bodies are changing rapidly. We have to learn how to live in bodies that are changing. And we're also, for most people, go through a very awkward teenage stage where they try and figure out what's the right look for them. And this is that awkward teenage stage where you wear weird outfits and you do funny things with your hair, and if you're a woman, you do funny things with your makeup, and maybe you pierce something that you later regret, or maybe you get a tattoo somewhere that you wish you hadn't. And that's kind of typical teenage angst. If you're a trans person, you go through all of that, and that is extremely uncomfortable because you're going through it in the wrong body, in the wrong gender. And then, if you transition as an adult, more and more people are transitioning at that same time, but if you transition as adult, which is still very common, then that happens again when you're an adult. So you go on a hormone regimen, which puts you through a different puberty, the one you wanted in the first place, but now you're doing it at 25 or 35 or 45 or even 55. And your body is changing. And once again, you have to figure out how to be in this body that is awkward and not one you're accustomed to. You're under the influence of raging hormones. It's not very different from being a teenager. So you're being bashed about by the hormones as an adult. And then you have to figure out also what your look is going to be. And you go through this whole awkward stage of, gee, your mother dresses you funny. And you're doing this as an adult, and you're doing this in front of people who know you, and you're trying to hold down a job. If you're lucky, a lot of trans people lose their jobs at this point, if they have them. But this is a different kind of transition as an adult. It's a life stage that you repeat. It's a second puberty. And usually you go through it more smoothly and quickly than you did the first time because you have the benefit of a certain amount of maturity. But there's no avoiding the barrage of hormones and what that does to you. And it's really very difficult to find your footing in what your look is going to be without some missteps. So that's another life stage that happens to trans people that doesn't happen to everyone else.
Well, I was thinking of Maureen's movie, 2 for 1, where the hapless protagonist ends up pregnant.
Yes.
And thinking, oh,
Well, that's a whole other story.
That's a whole
And
other
that-
story, but yet that just...
But that, it actually rarely happens by accident, but there are trans men who set out to get pregnant after transition. They go off their hormones, they still have all their reproductive parts, and they actually, so that's a whole other story. I'm not going to try and put that into this interview.
Yeah, we could.
I'm just talking about kind of, you know, people who are transitioning and attempting to just do it in as orderly fashion as they can, but it's disorderly. It's not something that nobody accomplishes puberty easily, and it doesn't matter that it's the second time in your adult. It's still very disruptive.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much for sharing your stories with us and for being with us today as part of these film conversations. Thank you so much, and thank you for all the work you're doing.
A pleasure. I enjoy my work, and I enjoy talking with you about it, so thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you for your interest.
Thank you.